Testing. Is this thing on?
Hello, hello, hello. Test, test.
I've never gotten to use my mic. And welcome to the first official episode of my YouTube channel. I am currently in Italy right now. I am on the west coast of the island. And real quick, I just want to show you guys the view because then you'll see what I'm seeing and perhaps it will make it a more immersive video for you. Let me turn this around. I am staying in this old castle on the water. And here's what it looks like. This is the little living room where I'm filming. I don't know if I need this mic or not because I'm not a real YouTuber yet, and I'll let you know one day. But just in case it helps, I'm gonna put it on here and I hope it doesn't distract you. Okay, I have my notes ready and today is a very fun topic. We are going to go over the 5 books that have most influenced my life so far, particularly when I was in college. I read these books and it helped me jump so many levels in my career. I feel like I was able to skip having an internship or kind of those entry-level positions. And it also is a lot of the reason that I was able to grow my finances from being just a broke college student to being able to pay for my own life in Los Angeles and get to travel. I'm really excited to share it with you because I think if you're in your 20s or really at any age, these are so valuable. So basically the way it's gonna go is there's 5 books and I am going to give you the 3 main takeaways from memory that I have of these books, because I think you can read books and really retain nothing just to get through them. So I think the lessons that stick with you are the most important. I would recommend that you read all of these books. They're so valuable, but if you don't want to, then I'm gonna kind of give you my Miley cliff notes of it and the ways that I've seen it play out in my life the most over the last 10 years. So why I'm so excited to share this is because in my 20s and when I was in college, I remember trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And in high school, I wasn't really much of a reader unless it was for school. And when I read this first book, it opened up my mind to so much curiosity and this craving for knowledge that couldn't be satiated. I started reading, listening to so many podcasts. I was just like a sponge for anything I could learn. And so I think if you're not a reader or you think I'm not a reader, because that's what I used to say about myself, you can become one. You just need to find a book that interests you enough and then it will unlock a whole world. Personally, for me, reading is what helped me jump so many steps in my career where I didn't have to have internships or entry-level positions, where I was able to increase my salary so much year over year that I went from being a broke college student to able to pay for my own life in Los Angeles and travel and just do things I never thought I'd be able to do at this age because of honestly just reading. The way I like to think about it when I was in college is that I always wanted a mentor, and half of these, more than half, all of them actually, frankly, all of them, I would have killed to have any of them as my mentor, but to get someone's time is very valuable. And so the way I think about books is you essentially have a private mentorship from these authors, and framing it in that way, I respected the time I spent reading so much more because I was actually so present and trying to absorb and learn as much as possible. It kind of feels like a cheat code to life. And so I'm really excited to share them with you. All right, let's get into the first book. The first book that I ever read in college that was recommended by the founders of the company I was working at, which was a startup at the time, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And you've probably heard about this book. It's a bit of a cliche at this point, but I think for a good reason. I wish I had my copy with me to show you. I took this book around like it was the Bible. It is highlighted. It has sticky notes. There's writing all over. I would get up every morning at 5 and read this book and then go to a workout class and just let all the stuff I read just marinate in my brain. But to this day, this is probably one of the only books where I could actually recall all 7 habits, tell you how it's impacted my life, and that's very rare for a self-help type book. So I will start with the 3 points that have stood the test of time in my career and that really reshaped the way I used to think about life and business and the way that I think now. So the first is begin with the end in mind. And this is really a concept of just starting with the why before you do anything. And for me, the way I saw that play out the most is if I'm going to take a job, if I'm going to work on a project, and especially working with clients, rather than just jumping into work, I always ask them, can you tell me and describe what is the win for you at the end of this situation? Because that will let me do very different work for them. If I know, I'll just give an example. Let's say I'm doing a social media campaign for a client. If I ask them, tell me what the win at the end of this is, and they say, we gain 1,000 followers, that's a win for us. Well, now I know I need to curate the content we do for peak engagement and following, which is different than if they were to tell me the win for us is that we rebrand our product in a way that feels more luxurious and more creative and more artistic because we're trying to speak to a different audience. Because if that's what they want, then I'm going to go for very editorial content, something that is going to make other creatives kind of marvel at what's happening. And those are different, but it's important to know what the win is, either for yourself or for the people you're working with, because you'll end up in a really different place and the process you choose will be very different depending on the end outcome. An example they gave in the book is called having your ladder against the right wall. And so the concept is you can be climbing upwards in something, but if your ladder is leaning against the wrong wall rather. If you think about a room, there's 4 walls. So you could put your ladder against any of those and start running up it and jumping and making progress and being efficient. But if you get to the top of the ladder and you've been against the wrong wall, you have to come down, take the ladder, move it to the other wall and start over. And so for me, I think when starting with the end in mind, it's really making sure that you're not chasing efficiency or chasing in the wrong direction, because especially in startups and business, it's so easy to just be doing stuff that is things, but not actually the most effective. Beginning with the end in mind is how I start basically every project that I do, whether that's a social media post, even for myself. I'm asking myself, what is the win out of this? Is the win that I get likes for me? Is that I share something of value with people and that they walk away with a happier energy? What is the thing that I'm doing this for? I guess another way to say this would be, is it just a means to an end, or is there a true purpose to what you're doing? So I found that super valuable. One quote that the author said that really stuck with me is that you can be busy, even efficient, but still not effective. And I think that's kind of a great summary of this point. The second concept from the 7 habits of highly effective people that I use is thinking in a win-win way, which means to seek a mutually beneficial outcome for both people in the exchange. And so why I think this is different, and they give examples in the book. You can have a win-win where you both walk away winning. You can have a win-lose where you walk away winning, the other person loses. You can have a lose-lose, you both lose. And I think why the win-win mentality is so different is because, especially early in your career, you'll be met with a lot of situations because you haven't necessarily earned a reputation or the right to speak on certain things, where you're faced with a decision where you might think, my boss is doing something that is wrong, or I want something different here. And rather than approaching it from what you want, if you're always looking for how can we both walk away from the situation better off and happy, you come into the solutions very differently. It will free you up from having so much conflict. This also is just great for relationships in general. Rather than starting with what you want or starting with why someone else is wrong, you start with, in this situation, how do we both leave it better? One thing I really like about this is that it starts to reprogram your mind and your thoughts into more of an abundance mindset, where instead of thinking, I need this for myself, let's just give an example of you wanting a raise and you want to make more money and your boss is saying no. So the win-win here is that you get a raise, but your boss feels like you're adding so much value to the team that of course they want to pay you more because you're providing a lot of value to them. If you go into that conversation thinking, I don't care about anything on their side, I just want more money, they will probably walk away either feeling like they've lost something, or you will walk away hearing, no, we're not giving you a raise, thus you lose. So I think just reframing it abundantly, where you think that, I actually wrote this one down. Abundant mindset is the belief that there's enough success, opportunity, and recognition for everyone. Starting to think that way, even in practical business moments, actually will just reshape the way you see relationships, practically everything you do in your life can be turned by this point of view. So I found that that is something that has really stuck with me all these years later. The third and final point from this first book is put first things first. And the concept here is that you manage the things you have to do in a day by your values, not urgency. And so I think at this time, I was in my first startup and I would get to the office, open my computer, and there'd be a bunch of emails. And you just start responding and reacting to things. But then the most important parts of my job, it would get to 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I hadn't even started on them. And so I think what's really interesting about this is that you start to prioritize the things that really matter instead of a reaction to things. So I think especially with social media now and where our phones have gone, that looks like not checking your notifications first thing in the morning, because that would be you reacting to things coming into your day instead of starting your day with what are your priorities. Maybe it is getting to the office on time, getting a workout in, having a good breakfast, whatever is important to you. You start with your values and then you later open up a window of time to respond to everyone's notifications in your life. So the quote I most love from this chapter is, "The key is not to prioritize your schedule, but to schedule your priorities." I'm going to put up the little quadrant that the author explains. So basically, if you were to map out things that are important and things that are urgent into 4 quadrants, he says that our goal should be to have quadrant 2 thinking, which hopefully will be right here, which are the things that are most important, not the things that are most urgent. And this is very counterintuitive to how most corporate jobs work. And it will allow you to be much more entrepreneurial because you will slowly break down, or at least I did, a lot of the should ways that things need to be done in business. And you'll start focusing on the highest impact areas where you'll see the biggest change in your life, career, friendships, etc. So really a matter of prioritization, but it's so helpful. We are ready for book number 2. Book number 2's title might at first go sound a little manipulative. It is not. I hope that you will read it because it truly, it's on the list for a reason. So this book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And a lot of people have heard about this book, or I've even talked to so many friends who have it just sitting on their coffee table, but they never read it. And if you read any book, no, you should read all of these, but I really think you should read this book. So the first point that I think really transformed my career, especially reading this, I read this my freshman year of college. The first point of the book that I recall is to be a genuinely curious person. And that on surface sounds really simple, but I think the art of asking really good questions, being more interested in others than your personal agenda, than yourself, it will open more opportunities than you think is possible. I cannot tell you how many business opportunities have come because of curious conversations in a coffee shop or meeting a stranger traveling. I think to be genuinely curious in life is one of the greatest gifts. It makes your day-to-day so much more enjoyable. It's more fun, it's more present, and it feels like your mind, you've started momentum on a treadmill. Do you guys know those treadmills where instead of being automatic, they're like those banana treadmills, and the more momentum you put into it, the faster it goes and it gets easier for the machine to run essentially. And if you stop, the momentum goes slower. That's kind of how I think about curiosity. When you start that muscle moving, it never really stops unless you stop using it. And so if you can turn on your curiosity, I think it will lead you down so many exciting paths. So Dale Carnegie says in this chapter, which I think this is such an incredible quote, he says, "You make more friends in 2 months by being interested in others than you would in 2 years by getting others to try to be interested in you." I think, again, it's just such a good reframing of your priorities, being servant-oriented towards others, curiosity-led. There is an important distinction here that curiosity is what he calls a habit of empathy. So it becomes muscle memory of genuine curiosity. It's not a social tactic to manipulate people. So the point of curiosity is not to say, I'm going to ask really good questions because I want this person to think this way about me. it may be at first, you will have to force yourself a little bit to think, how can I be more curious here? What other questions can I ask? But eventually that becomes habit. And he says a habit of empathy, which I think is so beautiful. And I absolutely love that. Oh, there's actually a second quote for this section. He also says that curiosity is the highest form of respect. And I couldn't agree more, because I think when you're curious about someone, you offer them dignity, you offer them your mental and emotional standing. I think curiosity bridges gaps between people. It can lead to compassion and context for their life. So I think curiosity is a huge part of what it takes to succeed in business, in relationships, in friendships, etc. I rest my case on point number 1, be genuinely curious. The second is to listen more than you speak. They kind of go hand in hand, but I think this is different. This is not one that I've mastered, but it's one I always think about because I am such a chatty person, and I constantly have to remind myself to actively listen to what people are saying, not to think about what I'm going to say next or what I think about what they're saying, but to really listen. And to listen more than you speak is an art form I haven't mastered, but one I aspire to. The third point is to assume people want to act with integrity and generosity. Another way you could say this is to see the best in people or assume that their motives are really pure. I think that this is not a natural instinct of mine when I feel wronged by somebody in a business context, or when I see them do something and I think that makes no sense. Why would you approach the situation this way? Just to give an example, perhaps in the past, I've had a social media intern who completely misses the mark on something. They miss a very important post, and I think, this is your whole job. How could you do that? This point of assuming that people want to act with integrity or have good intentions allows you to step out of the situation and first ask them questions. What's happening in your life? Did something prevent you from doing this? And I think it just gives you the opportunity to hear people out, to not make them confrontational, to still address problems directly. I think effective communication is very important, but I think you start the conversation from, again, another place of curiosity instead of judgment, and it just leads to a way better outcome in the end. So the 3 takeaways from this are to be a genuinely curious person, listen more than you speak, and assume that people want to act with integrity and generosity. Wow, we are flying through these. So let's get to book number 3. Book number 3 is going to be a little bit more tactical if you are looking to be an entrepreneur or are working in a startup or want to work in a startup or work for yourself, essentially, especially even if you want to be a content creator. I think this is really across the board for everyone. So the next book is called Lean Startup. And I need to fact check that. I'll put it in the bio of this video. I think it's The Lean Startup or Lean Startup. I'm pretty sure it's Lean Startup. If I have to bet on one, it's Lean Startup. So I read this, actually I listened to the audiobook, and I really recommend because it's a super dense book. So I think being able to hear it articulated felt different than reading to me. So this one I've actually only audiobooked. This book I didn't read in college. This book I read when I was in my 3rd startup and the first one that I had ever co-founded. And I think what is so remarkable about this book is it removes a lot of your personal bias when starting your own company. For example, they talk about this thing called the mom test, which is if you were to start a product, let's say you were going to sell t-shirts, and you tell your mom and your aunt and your cousins, hey guys, I'm selling these t-shirts. They will buy a couple, which will give you a false read on the data that you're getting sales. And you'll feel momentum from that and excitement, but you might have a product that nobody wants. And so I think that this book is so detailed. It's very Silicon Valley, very tech startup, but you can apply it to any entrepreneurial venture. Number 1 takeaway I have by far, I'll mention the other 2, but this is the main takeaway of the whole book. If you want to start your own business, launch quickly and with a minimal viable product, an MVP, which is essentially the smallest version of what you want to create. So I will give you an example. Oops, battery is low on this. I'm going to pause here for a sec because the battery's low and I need to switch it out. Welcome back. Okay, so we were talking about MVPs, minimal viable products. And I want to give you an example of how this looks if you're starting your own business. I started a jewelry brand called Charmy, which still exists. You can go check it out, Charmy Club. It's a custom charm necklace company. And when we wanted to start the brand, we had very high ideas of what we wanted the accessory brand to look like eventually. If I had started this brand before reading this book, I would have tried to get the packaging done, hire someone to do the branding. We hired someone to do our photography and take pictures of the product in a way that felt very editorial. Because I read this book, because I'd already done so many startups, I knew that the MVP is the most important. So we wanted to test out in the cheapest way possible, would anyone buy on TikTok custom charm necklaces? And now you might be saying, of course girls will. When we started this, there was really no one else doing what we were doing. And so rather than trying to get the highest quality charms, the highest quality chain, the highest quality waterproof jewelry line, and having all of the brand and the marketing done, we got the best quality we could for the amount of money we were willing to put in, which was very little. Me and my co-founder, to start the brand, each put in about $200 or $300, so $600 total. And with that, we ordered a very small amount of product to test with, and it wasn't the highest quality that we wanted. It was just what we could get in a weekend. So we, in 2 days, decided we were going to do this, applied for an LLC, had no idea how to do that. We went onto YouTube and said, how do you get an LLC in California? And followed the video. We got a website and went on YouTube and said, how do you buy a website domain? And did that. Day 2, we went and bought all of the inventory we needed. Day 3, we asked our friends to come over and film a launch TikTok for us to show the jewelry, and they all volunteered their time and were essentially our models for the website. Day 4, we put all of the website together, and day 5, we launched it by just posting a TikTok video. So the concept of the MVP is that we didn't buy and design a jewelry line. We didn't pay thousands of dollars for our branding to be done. We each invested a few $100s. The initial packaging was kind of ugly, honestly. It was just pink boxes and our sticker, and the initial offerings we had were not huge. It was actually very selective, and we, for marketing, did not spend any money on paid ads or anything like this. We organically posted 2 TikTok videos. Both videos went viral, and within the first week, we had done thousands and thousands of dollars of sales, and we didn't even have the inventory. We didn't think that many people would buy it, so we posted 2 videos, and the website sales were just coming in to the point we had to turn it off and do a pre-order because there were so many orders, and it took us 4 weeks to get all of the orders out. We were packing them until 1 a.m. every night, asking all of our friends to help us. Now, the flip side, that we took the MVP approach. The other approach would have been to invest, maybe 10 to 25 grand and have all the components perfect and then try marketing it. But why this is hard is you don't know if anyone actually wants your product. And so starting backwards, and this kind of goes back to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book, starting with the end in mind, does anyone want to buy this? Let's test it out first. If yes, let's invest to make the marketing beautiful, the packaging incredible, the social media perfect. We did our entire social media for this brand in 2 days on Canva, and neither of us are graphic designers. And the first thing most people said was, I love your social media, which is crazy because by trade, neither of us do that. And we were just testing it out for this experience. The second is to measure, then learn, then build. So you would continue the process of the MVP over and over. Okay, how can we slightly improve the product? What did we learn? And then you build more and you keep that iteration going. I don't want to get too in the weeds because this book is very technical. So if you really want to be an entrepreneur, the takeaway is just you should read this book. And the third I actually gave you up front, which is to avoid the mom test or those types of biases. And that is The Lean Startup. It's an incredible book, but it's very dense. So take your time with it and make sure you're paying attention to the audiobook, because if you kind of tune it out for a couple minutes, you will have no clue what's going on. Or maybe you're smarter than me and maybe you will. Let's get to book number 4. This one is kind of a cheat. I'm going to give you 2 books. They both have very similar takeaways and messages. And because the first 3 books that we discussed are very self-helpy, very entrepreneurial, I wanted to balance it out with what I feel like is kind of a missing component in the American entrepreneurship world, and that is the balance of having a balanced lifestyle, essentially. So I think what the other 3 books can do on a negative side is put you in a state of hustle, a state of grinding, of self-made billionaire type language of the more you do, the better. And if you work harder and harder and harder, you're gonna go further and further and further. Now, while I agree with working very hard, I think where America gets it wrong and swings to the other extreme of things is by sacrificing our health, our friendships, our lifestyle in support of this idea that when you arrive, you will then relax, you will then retire at 30. I disagree with that completely. I think you should work very hard, but I don't think you should sacrifice the most important things in life along the way, because I think eventually you will pay for that, whether that be because of stress, you get, some sort of health complication, or, you miss so many years and memories with your friends and family. I think you have to work so hard if you want to be an entrepreneur, but you also have to learn to balance that out. So these next 2 books I'm categorizing as very similar. The first is 4,000 Weeks. And the 3 takeaways from this book are, number 1, life is short. So it's called 4,000 Weeks because that's on average how many weeks we live for. And I think when you put it in terms of that, 4,000 is not that many. And if you're to look up your age right now on Google or ChatGPT and ask how many weeks have I been alive, I think you'll be kind of shocked that out of 4,000, there's not a lot left. And while that's a little bit morbid, it also gives a really beautiful perspective of the smallness and the finiteness of our lives in a way that asks, well, then how do I want to spend my days? And me personally, I don't want to spend them hustling and grinding and trying to get Forbes 30 under 30. If some of those things happen, that's incredible, but I mostly want to build a beautiful life. I want to have very meaningful relationships. I want to be healthy physically. I want to be learning new things and have time for hobbies and interests and really meaningful relationships. I think I said that, but I mean both friends and romantically. And those take a lot of time. And often the hustle culture would negate those existing. The second is to let go of control. And the book talks a lot about how our ego makes us feel like we have control over how our time is spent, our life expectancy. But the truth is, and the scariest thought for all of us, is that we really have control over nothing. And that at any moment, again, kind of morbid, but really, really sobering, is that we could die at any moment. And so if that's the case, then how are you spending your time? They suggest that instead of trying to control things, you stop trying to optimize and instead commit fully to what matters most. And I think in that you find a much more fulfilling day to day. The third thing I found most fascinating about this book, and that I had never read before, is how 9-to-5s were invented. And it's a really interesting look at capitalism and how that system was created to keep us on what they call the hamster wheel of work and your hours, and for you not really to have the time or capacity to build a meaning and beautiful life because you would be independent financially for that to exist. And right or wrong, I think it's really helpful information because knowledge is power. And I think the more you know, the more you're able to choose what parts of the system you want to engage with. And so I think learning how the 9-to-5 was invented was fascinating to me and helped me unhook from it faster and be more entrepreneurial when I realized that it was literally created to keep people doing the same thing every day. And then just as a bonus, I think one thing I found really interesting in this book particularly is the concept of our need, especially with AI and social media, is to optimize everything. We're trying to make everything more convenient so we can fit more in, so that ideally at some point we can rest and relax. And what the book does such a good job explaining, and this example really brought it home for me. Before we had email, people used to have to physically write letters. And when email was invented, people thought, wow, I'm gonna have so much more time because this made it easier. So instead of having to write a letter, send it in the mail, wait for someone to respond to it, and then write them again, you can just send it in 1 second. And that was supposed to make our life easier. What our humanity doesn't allow us to account for is that when you optimize, it doesn't make your life necessarily easier, because if you get now 100 emails a day, when you respond to those emails, you send it back, you get 100 responses. So it is a never ending cycle, another hamster wheel that you stay on in perpetuity. And so I think realizing that, it made me pull back from so heavily trying to optimize my career, my life, my finances, because I was able to realize you're never really going to get to a place where it stops. You have to pull the parachute, and you have to set your own boundaries and standards for how much time you'll spend working, when you take vacation, when you make time for the hobbies and passions that you really want to learn. And I found that it just freed me up so much, and I hope that you read this book because I really love it. Let's go to book number 4, part 2. This is a really similar book to 4,000 Weeks. The caveat is that this one definitely is a Christian book. If you don't have a relationship with God, if you don't believe in a God, you could read 4,000 Weeks. If you do or don't have a relationship with God, I still think you could read this book and learn so much. It is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. For me personally, this book was more impactful than 4,000 Weeks, but I just wanted to offer two. So The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I read during COVID, and the author it's by John Mark Comer. The author discuss how America in particular, but mostly Western culture, perhaps everywhere, but I think the book starts out criticizing American culture in particular. He says that we have a hurry sickness culture, a need to rush, to fit more and more into our days, to have a list that never ends of things we need to get done, and what that does to our mind, body, and soul, to always be in a state of activeness, essentially. Learning about hurry sickness culture was the first big takeaway, and just recognizing, and he does a much more eloquent job describing just how much it impacts us, and how, one, it hasn't always been that way, and how many cultures in the world don't operate in this way. And so there's pros and cons to it. There's a grandiose life you can build, but there's also a huge negative side to the rushing, and I just think learning about it gives you the opportunity to choose what you want and what you don't want. The second takeaway from this book was to live from presence, not productivity. And so this would kind of go similarly to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, of putting the first things first. So when you're living from a state of presence and not productivity, for me, for example, this would be the idea of having a morning routine. So if I am going for productivity, when I wake up, I'm checking my phone, I'm responding to texts from clients, I'm checking my email, making sure I didn't miss anything, I'm being productive. When I live from a state of presence, I have set up my morning routine where I take care of the things that I value the most. So my physical being, my spiritual being, the fun parts of my day. I love doing my hair, I love doing my makeup, I love actually getting dressed. So for me, my morning routine looks like a lot of quiet in the morning. I love to journal, I love to read, and I love to get in some sort of physical movement and make a homemade breakfast. For me, those are the things that set me up to be a great partner to the people I work with, to have energy in my day, to be in a good mood. They make me better, but they're not what our culture would consider productive, unless I were getting up at 5 a.m. and doing it all before 9 a.m. That would be productivity. Presence is, I always get 8 hours of sleep, unless I can't sleep or have like a flight. 8 hours of sleep is a non-negotiable, and I will sacrifice anything in my life. All my friends know that I'm not staying out super late if I can't sleep in the next morning. Similarly, I'm probably not making really early plans if I went to bed late, because sleep is the most important thing in the world to me. Oh my gosh, I want to talk to you guys about the books on sleep. That'll have to be a different video, but sleep is number one to me. And so that is me being present over productive. And the third takeaway from this book is the concept of having a rest day. I call it a play day. And so for me, it's Friday night to Saturday night. I don't do any work at all. It's one day a week where I do not respond to texts from clients. I'm off my phone. I'm outside as much as possible. And I'm just doing whatever would be the most fun to me, whether that's learning a new recipe to cook, trying a ballet class. Right now I'm in Italy, so probably a beach day, or hanging with friends. And at first there was a lot of resistance I felt from, either clients or when I was actually employed, people still wanting to contact you on this day. But eventually when you set that standard, people just know. And I just kind of give them, let's say they texted me something important about work. I would just give them a cheeky text and say, reminder, Saturday's my play day. And they would say, oh my gosh, you're so right. Enjoy your day. We'll talk tomorrow. And it sounds really small, but I think especially if you're going to work in a creative field or an entrepreneurial field, giving your brain one day off every week, non-negotiable, where it doesn't have to think about anything, you will see the best work you've ever done. You will see that your mind feels quiet, which is very rare for us. On these days, I try not to be scrolling on my phone at all. If I can, I leave my phone. And I think that it has done more for my career than almost any other habit. I would say sleep and taking off one day a week, fully one day, has been a complete game changer for me personally. Also health-wise, I think it does so much for your mental health to have a day where you're not responding to people, you're not working at all. I don't do anything chore-like either. It's truly one day a week where you get to just have fun, and it adds so much to your life. I look forward to these days every single week. All right, y'all, we are at our final book, which is The Artist's Way. And if you follow me on social media, then you have definitely seen me posting about this book. I discovered it about a year and a half ago. I was just about to leave for my first solo trip to Europe. I had put maybe 25 books on my coffee table and I was trying to decide what to bring. I almost didn't bring this book because to me, the title, The Artist's Way, was very intimidating as I didn't consider myself an artist. This book previously was my sister's and she is a graphic designer. She can draw, she can play instruments. She's a very typical artist. I didn't find that the title really related to me, and thankfully I had a friend over right before and they said, leave all the other books, just take this one. And I trusted this person, so I did bring a few books, but I did bring The Artist's Way in particular. So I think the first thing that I took away from this book is that everyone is an artist. And I've actually had people disagree with me on this quite recently, but she does such a good job, the author, Julia Cameron, does such a good job explaining why everyone is considered an artist and why it is not what our culture has said, which is someone who paints, plays music, someone who sings, someone who draws. We consider that an artist, but she does such a good job explaining how all of us innately have this thing in us where we need to create something. We need to change something for the better. And the example she gives on creativity and removing the labels we have from artistry is, for example, with a lawyer. That is not a typical occupation that you would say, oh, they're a creative. But she does such a good job of explaining, and I will do it not as good, when they are putting together contracts. There is so much creativity in how they weave their language and how they do things for their clients, hopefully on the positive side if they're a good lawyer. And she really just breaks down all these different occupations and how none of them could exist without creativity. And it just kind of changed my own perspective on myself because I began to, as uncomfortable as it was, allow myself to view myself as an artist. And that small change allowed me to start posting on social media, to not be scared of other people's opinions, to not critique myself so harshly because I viewed myself as a creative being who was meant to put things into the world, to try things, to make mistakes, to make art, to make things messy. And it changed how I work and it changed how I play. And that was my first takeaway. Everyone is an artist. And part of that is to overcome your fears and your inner critiques. So this one is actually, it is a book, but you don't read as a book. You read one chapter per week and you journal about that for those 7 days, and then you read the next chapter. So it is a 12-week commitment. The point of it is that you don't stop. So if you're gonna start it, you should be prepared to make it a priority for about 12 weeks. That being said, it single-handedly has changed my life more than pretty much any other book, financially, creatively, etc. The way the book flows is that there's this thing called morning pages, and you will journal 3 stream of consciousness pages per day every morning right when you wake up. You can't do anything else first, and you clear out your mind. It is so impactful for creativity. It is so impactful for prioritization, and it also is really impactful for judging yourself less because you learn that you just don't judge your thoughts, and it's such a unique habit, but I've seen it play out so practically in creating content where I just catch and release ideas now, which is a concept from the book, and I judge less. What will people think? Will this do well? It's not about it doing well. It's about me having fun in the process. And that might sound really basic to some people, but I know that a lot of my friends I've talked to feel similarly, where you're just very hard on yourself internally. It's actually less external. It's far more internal. And that's how I was. And it's so crazy now to look at my journals after a year and a half. I used to be so negative in my talk to myself, so harsh. And if you look at my journal entries from 2 years ago, it looks like a different person talking because it has shifted my personality so much. And I'm so much kinder to myself. And thus, I assume, so much kinder in my view towards others. But in particular, how I see myself has changed the most. Okay, guys, I think that is our first YouTube video done. I hope that these 5 books will benefit you, and I'm excited to share more about business and finances and all of these different topics. But I would love to hear as well if there's questions you have about career or life or faith or anything like this. And this is episode 1, so I'm excited to keep chatting. Love you guys lots. Thanks for tuning in, and I guess that's it. Bye. But really, I have to come back in to turn off the camera, so that can't be the ending. Okay, bye! Action! You can just call this a blooper because I know the video ended, but I wanted to show you guys a little bit of my room. I keep calling it a castle. I don't know if it's technically a castle, but it feels like a castle in Italy, and I wanted to show you guys around a little bit. This is my room. I'll flip it around so you can see. Oops. Sorry, all my vlog stuff is on the bed, but this is the room. It actually it's a 3-bed. So there's another bed in here, and then there's a second bedroom. And I love this wardrobe, is so cute. I haven't unpacked yet, so I'm gonna put everything in there. But why I'm really here is for this view. Can you see it? Oh, there we go.